ever get that feeling? Like your money, it just doesn't stretch as far as it used to.
Yeah, that's a feeling a lot of people are having, especially when it comes to the US dollar.
We're going deep on that today, talking all about this, the overvalued U.S. dollar.
It's definitely something that impacts everyone, no matter where you are or what you do. And Bank America Global Research, they've been looking into this.
They have, and they say it's overvalued.
They do, yeah, by a pretty significant margin, too. Something like 23% compared to, other major currencies around the world.
23%. That's a big number.
It is.
But hold on a second. What does overvalued actually mean? Like when we're talking about currencies.
Right. So it's a good question. It's kind of like, you know how sometimes there's like a vintage record that everyone suddenly wants?
Oh, yeah.
And the price, it just shoots way up, even though the record itself, it's the same, right?
Right.
It hasn't changed.
Same record.
Same thing with currency.
Okay.
Basically, supply and demand.
Oh, okay. So right now, high demand for U.S. dollars, that's driving the price up. I get it.
Exactly.
Okay, so that makes sense. But why is it so in demand right now?
Well, a couple of reasons, actually. For starters, the U.S. has got these pretty high interest rates right now.
Well, right, yeah.
Which makes it really attractive for investors. They're looking for a good return on their money.
Yeah.
It's like going to a shop and they've got a better sale going on. You're going to go to that shop, right?
Yeah, you go where the deals are.
Exactly.
Okay, so investors, they're flocking to the U.S. because their money can grow faster here. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But high interest rates, they're not the only factor driving this, right?
Right. You've also got, well, let's face it, a lot of global uncertainty going on. Economic instability, geopolitical events, you name it.
Yeah.
And when things are, a bit shaky, investors, they tend to see the U.S. dollar as kind of a safe haven.
Oh, yeah, it's like that old saying, when in doubt, go with what you know.
Yeah.
But some people might say, wait a minute, this safe haven status, doesn't that just show how strong the U.S. economy actually is?
Well, there is some truth to that for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the U.S. economy is still a major player on the global stage, but I think the key takeaway here is that this safe haven effect, it can sometimes, inflate the dollar's value beyond what the, underlying economic stuff might suggest.
So even though the U.S. economy is strong, the dollar might be even stronger, even artificially so.
Yeah.
Just because of this like flight to safety that everyone's doing. That's a really important point, I think, for our listeners to understand.
It is, and that's why it's so crucial to actually look at the degree of overvaluation.
Yeah.
This isn't just like some abstract economic, theory. This directly affects you. It affects everyone listening.
Okay, let's get specific then. How overvalued is the dollar against other currencies? Like we're talking global economy here.
Right.
It can't just be like a one-size-fits-all situation.
Exactly. And you're absolutely right. It does vary. For example, Bank of America estimates that the dollar is 30% overvalued against the Japanese yen.
Wow.
And 20% against the euro. And to put that into perspective, like the euro-dollar exchange rate, it's hovering around 1.02 right now.
1.0.
Meaning they're practically 1-to-1.
Wow.
Which, historically speaking, signals a significant overvaluation.
Wow, 1.02. For anyone planning a European vacation, that's a big deal.
It is.
So does that mean now's the time to book that dream trip while the dollar's still strong?
It's definitely something to think about. And it brings up a good point, too, that this overvaluation, it affects more than just travelers.
Right.
If you're importing goods from Europe, for instance,
oh yeah,
a strong dollar, that means those goods are going to be more expensive.
Makes sense.
But on the flip side, if you're exporting goods, your products are actually going to be less competitive, in the global market.
It's a ripple effect. It impacts businesses and consumers alike.
It really does.
But wait a minute, hasn't this happened before? Haven't we seen this kind of thing with the dollar in the past?
You're right. You're right to think that. The data actually shows that there were these similar peaks in the dollar's value back in 2002, 2017, and 2020. And each of those periods was, connected to certain economic events or shifts in interest rates.
Right.
Much like what we're seeing today, actually.
So this isn't totally uncharted territory, but knowing this has happened before, what can our listeners do right now to deal with this overvalued dollar?
Right.
What are some actual steps they can take?
Well, that's where things get kind of interesting. For folks who have, investments, especially in foreign markets, there's this thing called a currency hedging.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of hedging, but honestly, it always sounded a little bit complicated to me.
Yeah.
Can you maybe break it down for us in a way that's, easy to understand?
Sure, sure. Imagine like you're investing, let's say, $10,000 in a European company right now.
Okay.
With the dollar strong, you get more euros for your investment.
Right.
But what happens if, later on the dollar weakens?
Uh-uh.
When you convert those euros back to dollars, you could actually end up losing some of your gains.
So hedging, it's like a way to kind of lock in the current exchange rate so you don't, lose money later on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that basically what it is?
Yeah, it's like buying insurance for your investment
Okay.
against currency fluctuations.
Okay.
There are a bunch of ways to do it, but one common one is using, these financial instruments like futures contracts or options.
So it's not really about avoiding risk altogether,
Right.
but it's more about like managing it strategically.
Exactly. Yeah.
Got it.
And Bank of America, their analysis suggests that when overvaluation exceeds 15%, which it does right now,
Right.
it's definitely worth considering, looking into these hedging strategies.
Okay, but wait. If everyone starts hedging because they think the dollar's going to weaken,
Yeah.
wouldn't that actually like keep the dollar strong for a while longer?
That's a really good question, and it shows how complex this whole thing is. The whole interplay between like market psychology and actual economic reality.
Yeah.
You're right, like investor behavior, it can definitely influence currency values sometimes for a long time.
It's kind of like a game of chicken.
Right.
Like everyone's waiting for someone else to blink first.
Exactly.
And that kind of brings me to like your personal approach, right?
Yeah.
You said that you're kind of proactive when it comes to this.
Yeah. I start hedging when the euro dollar rate hits 0.95.
Okay, so you're not waiting for the dollar to like significantly weaken before you take action. You're
Right.
kind of anticipating the shift.
Exactly.
But why 0.95? What's the magic about that number?
Well, it's based on a couple of things, historical trends and my own kind of assessment of market sentiment.
Okay.
But, I kind of suspect that the real turning point, like when the market actually starts to shift, it might be closer to parity,
Okay.
meaning a 1-to-1 exchange rate between the euro and the dollar.
Interesting. So you're looking for those signs that maybe the safe haven appeal of the dollar is starting to fade a little bit.
Right, exactly.
But what could actually cause that shift? Like what could knock the dollar off its pedestal, so to speak?
Well, there are a few things, to keep an eye on.
Okay.
First and foremost, any change in what the U.S. Federal Reserve is doing with interest rates,
Oh,
if they decide to, lower rates,
yeah.
that could make the dollar a little less attractive to those foreign investors.
Yeah, it's like taking away that better deal that we were talking about before, right?
Exactly.
Might drive investors elsewhere.
Exactly.
What else should we be watching for?
Well, another big one is market confidence.
Okay.
If investors start to feel a bit more optimistic about the global economy,
Yeah.
maybe, some of those geopolitical risks ease up or economic indicators start looking a bit better,
Right.
they might be less inclined to seek refuge in the dollar.
So less fear equals less demand for the safe haven currency.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and one more thing, any potential changes to U.S. trade balances,
Okay.
if the U.S. can reduce its trade deficit
Yeah.
by exporting more and importing less,
Right.
that could also really shift things in terms of supply and demand for the dollar.
So it's not just about interest rates and,
Yeah.
and how investors are feeling. It's
Uh-huh.
also about like the actual flow of goods and services.
Exactly, yeah.
It's a lot of moving parts.
It really is.
Predicting the future of currency markets, that's got to be a tough job.
Yeah, it's never easy.
But understanding these key drivers that you've laid out, they can definitely help people make smarter decisions.
Absolutely.
Knowledge is power, as they
Yes,
say.
it is.
And speaking of knowledge, I feel like we've learned a lot today
Yeah.
from understanding, what does overvalued even mean
Right.
to practical things like currency hedging.
Yes, exactly.
What are some of the key takeaways that you want our listeners to really walk away with?
Yeah, it really does. Like whether you're planning a trip or investing in international markets,
Right.
or even just, buying groceries.
Yeah.
The strength of the dollar, it kind of has this ripple effect on your life.
Yeah, it really does.
It does.
It makes you think, right?
Yeah, it does.
Like when we say the dollar's a safe haven right now,
Yeah.
what does that actually tell us
Yeah.
about the world, the world that we're living in?
Right. If the perception is that, safety lies in U.S. dollars,
Yeah.
it kind of suggests like certain amount of, underlying fear.
Right. And uncertainty about the global economy.
So a strong dollar might seem like a good thing on the surface,
Right.
but it could also be a sign of something else going on,
Yeah.
deeper anxieties, in the global market.
Yeah. Something to think about.
It is. That's a really thought-provoking point, I think.
It is.
So important to stay informed.
Yeah. Absolutely. Consider your own goals, and think about how you want to manage potential risks.
Yeah, are you comfortable riding this wave,
Yeah.
Or are you looking for ways to kind of protect yourself when or if the tide turns?
Such good advice.
Yeah.
A huge, huge thank you to our expert for taking us on this deep dive today
Yeah.
into the world of the overvalued dollar.
My pleasure.
It's not just, numbers and theories. It's about understanding the forces that shape our world and making good decisions, right?
Absolutely.
For ourselves.
It is.
To our listeners, remember, knowledge is power. Sid.
Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and join us next time for another deep dive into a topic that matters to you.
Yeah.
Until then, happy exploring.